Hello and welcome to Middle East Macro Media. I am your moderator, Umair Jamal. And in today's session, we examine the shifting South Asian regional order and India's role in it, and how changing geopolitics are redefining regional organizations. With SAARC largely stagnant, platforms like BIMSTEC are gaining traction. Political shifts in Bangladesh, strained India Pakistan ties, and surging US Iran tensions are reshaping bilateral relations and sub regional cooperation in the region. This dynamic landscape directly impacts India's neighborhood strategy and the future of South Asian regionalism. Joining us to unpack these developments is Professor Sreeradha Datta. Dr. Datta teaches international affairs at OP Jindal Global University and is a non-resident senior fellow at the Institute of South Asian Studies, National University of Singapore. An expert on South Asia, the Indo-Pacific and regional security, Dr. Datta has authored over 10 books, including her latest, Bangladesh on a New Journey, Moving Beyond Regional Identity. Dr. Datta, it's a privilege to have you with us. Welcome to the session.
Thank you, Mer. Happy to be here.
Dr. Datta, let's start with SAARC's perceived, ineffectiveness, which is due to various reasons. Pakistan and India being there is one of them. In recent years, New Delhi has significantly pivoted its diplomatic and economic energy towards BIMSTEC. I want to ask you, what has really happened to SAARC, and can BIMSTEC truly serve as a permanent or a sort of structural replacement or an alternative for SAARC to integrate South Asia?
So, as you mentioned, there are several factors that has affected the functioning of SAARC, right? And India, Pakistan, of course, is on top of that, the hostility and the border issues. But even that apart, as you know, SAARC was designed to be an economic regionalism, right? And we never found that to emerge. Again, while politics has always been one of the problems, but I've also argued that, the kind of complementaries that existed in the region, and though we've often seen many reports, credible reports about the kind of potential that the region hold, we've seen that within the region that the states were not working so well with each other. Most of us were growing fabulously well if you take 1985 onwards, but we were growing and our export base was growing with countries outside the region, not within. That was also because of many of the trade complementarities didn't work, many of the trade logistics that we were discussing didn't work. So that was also one of the reasons that, which is why SAARC has been stagnant. And we've also had sub-cooperative elements within SAARC. And at this point of time, just now, we are actually seeing a bit of that emerging finally. We are seeing an energy trade, which is going to hopefully start off very soon between Bangladesh and Nepal, but with India, supporting the lines, because obviously geographically India has a role to play in that. So this is one of the first of its sorts, and we are hoping, we've always talked about, transport connectivity corridor. That's something again, possibly with India and Bangladesh opening of the borders again, there'll be a possibility to relook that. So, but it hasn't taken off the way it was envisaged in the late 80s. But which is why I think, because of the several factors, there was a interest in another regional platform, which is BIMSTEC, as you referred to. BIMSTEC again was a very slow starter. It is only just few years ago that we actually got a charter. So it hasn't also been, something which has kind of captured people's imagination. What we now see within BIMSTEC is that a multimodal transport arrangement has been signed amongst other members, and there's work which is going on, which is kind of a sectoral kind of a cooperative framework. But at the other hand, one thing that has worked very well in BIMSTEC is that the capacity building exercises that has happened, where India plays a very key role. We've also seen within BIMSTEC, or even within the larger region, actually, India has emerged as one of the in terms of the first responder, as we say it, in any humanitarian situations. So much of that has happened, but I think we are still waiting for trade complementary. We have been discussing trade, free trade arrangement within BIMSTEC, but I think we are far away from it. What we should do actually look at logistical issues, see how seamlessly we can, take this forward in terms of our tariff plans, in terms of opening up our markets to each other. So those are the kind of, I think, focus this, we should be giving it. But also on the other hand, there has been a lot of cooperative framework which is emerging in the maritime. And we've seen defense diplomacy take place, we've seen military exercises take place. So much of that has emerged within BIMSTEC. It is, again, I would say a slow starter, but I see promise. I see that in the last couple of years, there has certainly been a movement forward.
I want to build on one point you touched on, the slow start as far as BIMSTEC is concerned. There's a very interesting development which is happening, since what has happened in Bangladesh over last year or so. Pakistan seemingly has better terms with Bangladesh now, or the regime before this one. And there have been reports that Pakistan is trying to, come up with an organization of its own, which will have the support of China and Bangladesh could be part of it, and India might not be there. So if we look at it in a way, we had SAARC stalled and BIMSTEC where Pakistan is not present, and then Pakistan is trying to create its own, institution with the help of others. Is the political baggage in this region too big, for any organization to actually survive or bring the region together?
It's a difficult, I mean, I don't think there's any yes or no answers, but yes, I guess Pakistan will do what it wants to do in terms of building out regional initiatives. But I think BIMSTEC holds promise in terms of the geography. If you look at, the potential of Bay of Bengal, even though we know there's a bit of a issue on the Indo-Pacific because, the recent, the US command and the deletion of the word Indo and all of that. But at the same time, there is no going away from the fact that Indo-Pacific is, space for geographical interest and, the international engagement which is happening, which has a very, very deep impact also on Bay of Bengal, considering also the maritime space. So in that sense, I think, Bay of Bengal has a very, very relevance which we can't move away from. So while there has been a slow starter, and I think the other issue also has been, one of the few regional organizations which is actually bridging South Asia and Southeast Asia. We've also seen, and here Myanmar and Thailand are the two members in as part, BIMSTEC members. But we've seen Myanmar has been going through domestic churning themselves. And we've just seen an election, whichever way you accept it or not, the junta is in place and there is hopefully some stability, we don't know. So that has also been a reason why within BIMSTEC, the multimodal activity that we are talking about, the transport activity that we are saying has also suffered. So when one of the member countries, a 7-member country, one of them is deeply affected, its economy is affected, the social, landscape is deeply affected, then clearly the region gets affected. So which is why BIMSTEC has it. BIMSTEC, again, you mentioned Bangladesh. Bangladesh was going through a journey for the last 2 years. Nepal had a journey. Sri Lanka settled down post its, student uprising and civil society movement. So even all the other countries within BIMSTEC were going through their own different trajectories. So it is in that sense, I would say that while each one is now, because clearly domestic consolidation is the first thing that member states want to do. And it was only when things are stable, and also the world economy hasn't helped us. We've gone through some very, very critical times, and which is affected as the Russia-Ukraine war, the Iran US situation, which is also, while it looks far away geographically, it has a deep impact on all the economies that are functioning within BIMSTEC. So in that sense, I would say BIMSTEC has been handicapped to some extent. But once things fall in place and all the states within South Asia and Southeast Asia are able to politically settle down, I think we'll see much of the promise coming up. But the two things which has come out very positively within BIMSTEC is, one is that India's got a center built in Delhi, in Haryana actually, which is where all the maritime activities kind of how shall I say it? I mean, you have to be a part of that center to actually see that you can be monitored. So if there's any unlawful activity or anything like that, the center is able to zero down on it. And the other thing that we have in Noida, again, in a part of Delhi, is that we've been able to give them real time warning on climate changes and weather front, which is something, again, thanks to the satellites and all of that, and that technology improvement that has happened in this part of the region, that India has been able to offer those services. And every BIMSTEC members often talk about the fact that these have been very helpful, especially, as I mentioned, the Bay of Bengal, again, given, in certain very difficult weather conditions at times. And many of these the coastal states are deeply affected. So these weather warnings and, the fact that India is ready to always give support as in any humanitarian situation is something I see as a very positive development and something that has been appreciated by all the members, I would say.
Dr. Radha, I want to ask you. You talked about capacity of BIMSTEC and India's central role in it, and other regional countries joining it, and a lot other which is happening, which says a lot about the potential there. But do you see at any stage from medium to long run Pakistan being part of BIMSTEC, or would India accept that? Just you want to look at sort of from India's perspective. What do you think about that?
So the problem with Pakistan is very clear to everyone, to Pakistan, of course, and to everybody else. If Pakistan stops doing cross-border terrorism, then I don't think India has any problem with Pakistan. We've seen that recently in the Pahalgam, terror attacks. Well, I mean, civilians were killed. I mean, I can understand security forces being hostile towards each other, but there's so many instances, and that Pakistan has deeply damaged and clearly fatal attacks on the civilians of India. So it is in this context, and I mean, there has been many attempts, not only by Prime Minister Modi, but even the previous head of the states and prime ministers to, have this kind of a dialogue with Pakistan. There are many such, confidence building measures that were initiated. But every time it looked good, again, there'll be some particular act of such dastardly attack on the civilian again, which would obviously, roll back every goodwill that you had earned. So it is in this situation, if Pakistan stops, using terror as a tool for its foreign policy, as I call it, I'm sure things will be back to the usual, where we can have, I'm not saying that every neighbor has to be on board on every single issue. There are always some underlying issues between all neighbors. That's a fact of the matter in every region. So Pakistan and India might have differences on several factors, which includes borders and other things. But to do these, horrible attacks on India,
One second.
This meeting. So as I was mentioning, that it is quite natural that the neighborhood would have problems. Any country with its neighbors, it's a very done thing. It happens everywhere. But the kind of problem that India's faced from Pakistan is another extreme level. And I think the point here is that it's not new. We've had this attacks from 1965 and earlier. So it's been constantly periodical attacks where there's been many dialogue mechanism in place, confidence building measures that were, initiated by India, and many such attempts to discuss the issue. We do know that there's a issue about the borders, but it didn't mean that Pakistan would do what it did to India for several years. And as I said, right now, the way India looks at it and the way I think Prime Minister Modi has, said that so very uncertain terms, that it's not going to be quiet and accept whatever Pakistan hands out to India. So you've seen Operation Sindoor, you've seen earlier initiate in counterattacks like that. So at this point of time, if you ask me can Pakistan be a part of BIMSTEC? I think Pakistan can be a part of, I mean, geographically, maybe not BIMSTEC because it doesn't fall on the Bay of Bengal, but even if you are to stretch it, let's say we stretch the region and expand it, I don't see why Pakistan will not be able to be part of it, but only when it lets go of its, using terror as a tool of foreign policy. I think that is something that we are very, very sensitive about, that we cannot allow this neighbor to do these kind of things. And if you have a problem, I'm sure there's possibility and many ways to discuss the problem, but not what Pakistan does. So this is completely unacceptable behavior, and which is why we have a situation where political engagement with Pakistan is almost zero. We have very bare minimum diplomatic engagement. So, it's not a very healthy scenario in the neighborhood. But I really must say here that there is only that much India can do. We have to find, Pakistan forthcoming on this, because they've always been in denial about this. What has been happening, what is emanating from their land. So I think there has to be some kind of a initiative, a positive step forward from Pakistan side, if they're interested in engagement. And I'm sure if that's something which happens in the days ahead, India will be more than happy to, be a part of a regional framework where all the neighbors are together.
Dr. Sreeradha, you've said a lot about Pakistan being a, enabler of terrorism, but as you know, Pakistan has similar claims toward India. So I'll leave that there. Respectfully, I don't agree to much of what you said on that, but I just want to ask you one last question on, what do you see, what is your assessment in terms of trajectory of India and Pakistan relationship from a regional perspective, not a bilateral perspective, in the wake of war in Iran and the agreement that has been signed recently, where Pakistan played a key role and it has been recognized globally. If you can answer that, please.
I think it's a very commendable role that Pakistan played in terms of mediating this crisis, and I think there is absolutely no question about the fact that it was a very positive initiative everywhere, including India. I'm absolutely sure, convinced about that. There's no issue on that. So far as the region is concerned, there has been many instances, Umair, we've seen in the past. I'm not talking about recent past. I'm talking about, say, from the 70s and the 80s, instances where Nepal ground was used by Pakistani non-state actors to launch things against India. Bangladesh here at a point of time with, we've seen periodically Pakistan finding soft ground for all of that. Again, these are non-state actors always. These are some hardline elements always which find spaces and causes and reasons to hurt and India's security issues. So that has been an ongoing issue in the region. But today, if you look at it, I think also on the other hand, politically, Pakistan, it seems to be, and it's a new development that we see with Bangladesh. We've seen that recently with the coming of the Yunus government, the interim government, very high-level visits going on. I think even with the new elected government under BNP with Tariq Rahman as the Prime Minister, there has been some visits, and so there is some engagement. I was actually privy to one particular I think discussion that was happening on solar panels, which is something that Pakistan has done an incredible job also on that. So there are many, I think, and again, Pakistan, of course, has close relationships with several of the other neighbors in the region. And I think nobody questions that. I mean, it is, again, as a part of the region, as part of your own economic and, issues, if you want to, if you think Pakistan has something to offer, I don't think India questions that at all. What we question is that, as I said, it's not necessarily the state actors which are the concern here. It is often the non-state actors which create concerns and create, basically, to say it very, straight, is to hurt India's security concerns. I think that is something what we've often seen happen. And there are these elements, these fundamental elements that we often find in and around the region. So that's something that India is a bit sensitive about. But otherwise, I'm sure, I mean, it makes perfect sense for all the neighbors to work together. And as I said, despite the fact that there's been so much of reports and so much of studies which refer to the potential that the region possesses, but why we've not been able to have any of it. I mean, our outcome has been really minimal compared to the potential. But we, of course, know that Pakistan by itself, on its own, it's not doing economically very well. The political instability is, of course, a matter of question, a matter of argument. Socially, there are many challenges again. But that doesn't mean that Pakistan is not able to engage well with the other neighbors, and I'm sure each one has a reason to engage. And I think we all. I want to definitely look at this engagement in a positive framework. That all of us are something to contribute to each other, and as long as it doesn't mean or pose any concern to the other neighbor, and I mean that only for not for India, but I also mean that for other neighbors, big and small, whether it's Sri Lanka, whether it's Nepal, Bhutan, everybody should feel comfortable in a cooperative framework to work with each other. I think that for me is somebody who's studied regionalism from a very young age. I always look at it like that. At end of the day, it we always want to do better things for our own people, right? Why do governments exist? And you can only provide better services, better goods, better terms of conditions only when you work together. So the dividend always is when you're working in a positive framework, not when you're being hostile, not when you're trying to, outdo somebody else. Or, I mean, as I say, underlying causes, underlying differences will be there. But that can be, as you said, that, you didn't agree with me. With some of the things I said about Pakistan, fair enough. We should have a dialogue. We should discuss it. We should talk about it, but not to do it in a different way. We have to find mechanisms to discuss the differences. I think that is very, very important.
Dr. Sreeradha, thank you very much. Very insightful and for your time. Thank you for joining us on the show today. Hopefully, we'll have you back soon.
And thank you so much, Umair.